Let's take a look at circles. So consider this circle right over here. We'll begin by defining some key terms associated with circles. So the line that goes from one end of the circle to the other end and passes through the center of the circle is called the diameter. And now let's consider this line over here that goes from the center of the circle to the edge of the circle, or any place on the perimeter of the circle, is known as the radius. And then the outline of the circle is known as the circumference. Now this line right here that goes from a point on the circumference to another point on the circumference is known as a chord. Now one thing to note is that radius is always half of the diameter. Now let's take a look at pi. So the value of pi is approximately 3.14. And this is because this is how many diameters fit around the circumference of a circle. So let's consider this circle and its diameter. This diameter fits around the circumference 3 times, and then there's a little bit of space left, and that space is roughly 0.14. So essentially what pi is the number of diameters that fit in the circumference of a circle, which is 3.14. Now let's look at the circle with a diameter of 7 centimeters. How would we find its circumference? Well, to find its circumference, we can either use circumference equals pi times diameter or circumference equals 2 pi r. Now the reason there's two formulas is because 2 times the radius is the diameter. So 2 pi r is basically saying pi d, pi times diameter, which is why these two formulas are the same. So now let's look at circumference equals pi times diameter. Since we're given the diameter, we would sub in approximately 3.14 for pi and 7 for the diameter, and this gives us around 21.98 centimeters, which means that the circumference of the circle is 21.98 centimeters. Now if we were to leave this in terms of pi, which means that instead of subbing in 3.14 for pi, we just leave pi in the answer. So to do that, we just do pi and we just sub in the diameter, and then we leave the final answer with pi. We don't evaluate pi as 3.14. Now let's consider this circle right here with the radius of 2 centimeters. To find the circumference of this circle, we would need to use the formula 2 pi r, because here we're given the radius. So to find the circumference, we simply substitute in 2 for the radius, and we multiply the three numbers, and this gives us 12.56 centimeters. So the circumference of this circle is 12.56 centimeters. Now if the question asked to leave the answer in terms of pi, then we would do the same process, except same as before, we would not substitute 3.14 into pi. Rather, we would leave pi as is and do 2 times 2, and this gives us 4 pi centimeters. Now what about finding the radius? So let's just say we're given the circumference of 35 centimeters, and the question asks us to find the radius. Well, to do that, we would still use the same formula. However, we would isolate the radius. So to do that, we divide both sides by 2 pi. And this means that the radius is going to equal circumference divided by 2 pi. And after we do this, we substitute in 35 for circumference and 3.14 for pi. And once we do this, we simply evaluate and we get 5.57 centimeters as the radius. Now let's look at this circle right here with the diameter of 20 centimeters. And we're asked to find the area. Well, the formula for area is pi r squared. And here, we need to substitute in the radius, but we're given the diameter. Now, as I mentioned before, the radius is half of the diameter. So to find the radius, we basically divide the diameter by 2, and this gives us 10 centimeters. And then we substitute in 10 for the radius, and we get our answer of 314 centimeters squared. Now to leave this in terms of pi, we just do 10 squared, which gives us 100, and then multiply it by pi, which is just 100 pi centimeters squared. Now, why is the formula pi r squared? Well, to answer that, I'm going to divide this circle into 8 pieces and rearrange these 8 pieces, which are triangles with a little rounded edge, into this parallelogram. And once I do that, I can then find the area of this parallelogram. So we know that the formula to find the area of a parallelogram is base times height. So the base of a parallelogram here is 4 of these rounded edges, and this is equal to half of the circumference. And so half of the circumference would be 2 pi r divided by 2. And if we divide that by 2, we get pi r. And now the height of the parallelogram is from the center to the middle edge of the rounded part. And this is the radius, because the radius is from the center to any point on the circle. So essentially what we're doing is we're doing pi r times r, which gives us pi r squared. And that's why the formula for area is pi r squared. So if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments below, and they will be answered as